The red lights flashed across the command center of New Seoul Colony as Captain Lee Jinwoo stared at the tactical display. 67 hegemony warships hung in the darkness beyond the planet's outer moon. Each ship was the size of a city and carried weapons that could turn continents into glass. "How long until they reach us?" Jinwoo asked his communications officer. 18 hours, sir," came the reply. "Maybe 20 if we're lucky." Jinwoo nodded slowly. 20 hours to evacuate 3 million people. 20 hours before the last human colony in the galaxy would face the same fate as Earth, Mars, and all the others. He had seen the recordings from the previous attacks. The hegemony never left survivors. Down in the medical bay, Dr. Park Minji moved between the wounded survivors from the outer settlements. The lucky ones had escaped before the hegemony's scout ships arrived. The unlucky ones bore the marks of alien energy weapons, burns that went down to the bone, radiation sickness that turned skin gray and made hair fall out in clumps. "Doctor, we need more beds," said Nurse Han Soo-young, her voice tight with stress. "The transport from Mining Station 7 just arrived. 43 wounded, 12 critical." Minji wiped sweat from her forehead. They had been working for 36 hours straight. The colony's medical facilities were built for minor injuries and routine checkups, not mass casualties from alien attacks. "Put the critical cases in Surgery Bay 2. Use the cafeteria tables if you have to." In the engineering section deep underground, Kim Tae-yang worked frantically to restore power to the evacuation shuttles. The hegemony's electromagnetic pulse weapons had fried most of the colony's electronics during their first probe attack 2 days ago. Everything had to be rebuilt from spare parts and scavenged components. "This is useless," muttered his assistant Lee Kangman as another circuit board sparked and died. "We fix one shuttle and 3 more break down. At this rate, we'll get maybe 50,000 people off-world before they arrive." Tae-yang refused to look up from his work. His hands moved with practiced precision, connecting wires and testing circuits. "Then we work faster. My daughter is in Sector C. I'm not leaving her here to die." Song Nari moved through the underground bunkers where families huddled together in the dim emergency lighting. Children cried for parents who would never come home. Elderly colonists sat in silent resignation, remembering when humanity had dreams of conquering the stars instead of running from them. "Please, everyone remain calm," Nari announced to a group of refugees. "The evacuation transports will begin loading in 6 hours. Essential personnel only for the first wave, then families with children." An older man named Park Dong-yuk stood up from his makeshift bed. "What about the rest of us? There aren't enough ships for everyone, we all know it." The bunker fell silent. Nari had no answer because the man was right. The colony had transport capacity for maybe 800,000 people. Even if they could repair every damaged shuttle, they would need 3 times as many ships to save everyone. High above in the orbital defense platform, Admiral Choi Do-hyun reviewed his pathetic fleet. 12 patrol ships, 4 frigates, and 2 ancient cruisers that belonged in a museum. Against the hegemony armada, they might last 15 minutes if they were very lucky. His tactical officer, Commander Shin Ji-young, stood beside him studying the enemy formation. "Sir, they're maintaining standard siege positions. No attempt to rush us or prevent evacuations. It's like they want us to suffer first." Do-hyun had fought the hegemony for 12 years. He understood their tactics. They enjoyed watching human colonies tear themselves apart with fear and desperation before moving in for the kill. It was psychological warfare taken to its most cruel extreme. "Send a message to all hegemony vessels," Do-hyun ordered. "Full broadcast, all frequencies." The UN communication systems activated. Across the void of space, his words reached every alien ship in the enemy fleet. "This is Admiral Choi Do-hyun of the human colony New Seoul. You have destroyed our worlds, murdered our people, and driven us to the edge of extinction. You offer us surrender for a quick death or resistance for prolonged suffering." He paused, looking out at the stars that had once seemed full of promise for his species. "We choose neither. Come and take what you can, but know this. Humanity will make you pay for every inch of ground, every breath of air, every drop of blood. We will not go quietly into the dark. The transmission ended. In the silence that followed, every human on the defense platform felt a strange mixture of pride and terror. They had just declared war against an enemy that had never lost a battle. Dr. Yoon Subin worked alone in her research laboratory, surrounded by computers and experimental equipment. While others prepared for evacuation or final battle, she searched for something else: a weapon, a miracle, anything that might give humanity a chance to survive. Her screens displayed brain scan data from human volunteers and captured hegemony technology. For months, she had noticed something strange in the patterns. Human neural activity seemed to interfere with alien quantum systems in ways that made no scientific sense. "Come on," she whispered to herself, adjusting parameters on her neural interface prototype. "There has to be something we're missing, some advantage we haven't found yet." Outside, the evacuation had begun. Long lines of colonists moved toward the transport pads with whatever belongings they could carry. Children clutched toys while parents tried to hide their fear. Everyone knew that most of them would never see another sunrise. Captain Jinwoo walked among his people, offering words of encouragement that rang hollow in the cold night air. Behind him, the defense fleet prepared for launch. Pilots said goodbye to their families, knowing they flew toward certain death. In 18 hours, the hegemony would arrive to finish what they had started on Earth 5 years ago. The extinction of the human race would be complete. But in the underground laboratories and bunkers of New Seoul, something was stirring. Something that would change everything. Humanity's final hour was approaching, and with it, a discovery that would make the galaxy tremble. Dr. Yoon Subin had not slept in 48 hours. Her laboratory was a mess of scattered papers, empty coffee cups, and blinking computer screens. Every few minutes, the building shook as hegemony scout ships tested the colony's outer defenses. Each tremor reminded her that time was running out. "The patterns are too consistent to be random," she muttered, staring at the neural scan data on her main display. Human brainwaves showed strange spikes whenever they came near captured hegemony technology. The alien quantum processors seemed to stutter and glitch in response to human thoughts. Her research assistant, Dr. Kim Yuna, entered the lab carrying more test results. The volunteers from the medical bay showed the same readings, even unconscious. Patients in comas trigger interference in the alien systems. Subin rubbed her tired eyes. It makes no sense. Human neural patterns operate on completely different frequencies than hegemony quantum matrices. There should be no interaction at all. Above ground, the evacuation continued with desperate efficiency. Transport ships lifted off every 20 minutes, carrying families away from the doomed colony. But the math was cruel and simple. At this rate, less than half the population would escape before the hegemony arrived. Captain Lee Jinwoo stood in the command center, watching the evacuation progress on multiple screens. His tactical display showed enemy ships moving closer. 16 hours remained before the final assault began. "Sir, we have a problem," reported his communications officer. "The hegemony just destroyed the evacuation convoy that left 6 hours ago. All ships lost, no survivors." The command center fell silent. Jinwoo closed his eyes for a moment, thinking of the 8,000 people who had died in the cold darkness of space. Men, women, and children who thought they were escaping to safety. "They're not letting anyone leave," said Commander Shin Ji-young. "This isn't just conquest, they want complete extermination." In the medical bay, Dr. Park Min-ji received the news about the destroyed convoy. Among the dead were 12 of her medical staff who had volunteered to help establish field hospitals on the rescue ships. She leaned against the wall and tried not to cry in front of her remaining team. "Doctor, what do we do now?" asked Nurse Han Soo-young. "If the evacuations are useless, should we stop treating the wounded?" Min-ji straightened up and wiped her eyes. "We keep working. These people are still alive, and that means something. We don't give up until the very end." Down in the engineering section, Kim Taeyang received a different kind of message. His daughter's evacuation transport had been in the destroyed convoy. She was gone, along with his wife and parents. His hands shook as he tried to continue repairing the shuttle engines, but the work felt meaningless now. His assistant, Lee Kangman, found him sitting on the floor staring at nothing. I'm sorry, Taeyang. I heard about your family. Taeyang looked up with red eyes. What's the point? We fix these ships and the hegemony destroys them. We save some people and they kill them anyway. They won't even let us die with dignity. In her laboratory, Dr. Yoon Subin made a breakthrough that would change everything. She had been running simulations on human neural patterns when she discovered something impossible. The interference effect wasn't just disrupting alien technology, it was actually damaging the quantum matrices at a fundamental level. Yuna, look at this, she called to her assistant. When I expose the hegemony processor to concentrated human brainwaves, the quantum structure begins to collapse. The effect cascades through connected systems. Dr. Kim Yuna studied the data with growing excitement. It's like a virus. One damaged processor spreads the interference to others in the network. Subin ran more tests, pushing the neural interface to higher levels. The results were both thrilling and terrifying. Human consciousness could be weaponized against hegemony technology, but the process would burn out the human brain completely. It was a weapon that required the ultimate sacrifice. Pilot Kang Hyun-woo sat in his fighter craft, running pre-flight checks for what everyone knew would be a suicide mission. The human defense fleet was preparing to launch against impossible odds. Every pilot understood they were buying time for the evacuation, nothing more. His wingman, Park Sung-ho, climbed into the cockpit of the fighter next to him. My wife and kids were on the convoy that got destroyed, he said quietly. I have nothing left to lose now. Hyun-woo nodded. Most of the pilots had similar stories. The hegemony had taken everything from them already. Death in battle seemed almost peaceful compared to watching their species slowly die. Dr. Subin's voice crackled over the communication system throughout the colony. All military personnel, report to the main briefing room immediately. All civilians remain in designated shelter areas. Within an hour, every soldier, pilot, and officer on New Seoul had gathered in the colony's central auditorium. Admiral Choi Do-yeon stood at the front with Dr. Subin beside him. Dr. Subin has made a discovery, the Admiral began. She will explain it to you, and then you will make a choice. Each of you will decide for yourself. Subin stepped forward, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. I have found a way to turn human consciousness into a weapon against hegemony technology. The neural patterns in our brains can disrupt their quantum systems and cause cascade failures in their ships. A murmur ran through the crowd. Captain Jinwoo raised his hand. What's the catch, Doctor? The process is fatal, Subin replied simply. Using your mind as a weapon will burn out your neural pathways completely. You will die, but your death could destroy an entire enemy ship. The auditorium fell completely silent. Song Nari, who had been treating wounded civilians all day, was the first to speak. How do we do it? Subin gestured to the neural interface devices her team had prepared. Modified versions of these can be installed in fighter ships or worn as portable units. When activated, they will amplify your neural patterns and direct them at hegemony systems. Pilot Kang Hyun-woo stood up. I volunteer for the first test. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. My family died on Earth 5 years ago. I've been dead inside ever since. At least this way my death will mean something. One by one, other hands rose throughout the auditorium. Pilots who had lost their loved ones, soldiers who saw no future for humanity, engineers and doctors who wanted to strike back against the alien killers. Admiral Do-hyun looked out at his people with pride and sorrow. Very well. Dr. Subin will prepare the neural interfaces. Those who volunteer will launch with the first wave of fighters. The rest will defend the colony to the end. As the meeting ended, Hyun-woo approached Dr. Subin. How long do I have once the interface activates? Perhaps 30 seconds before brain death occurs, she answered honestly. But in those 30 seconds, you will hit them with the full force of human consciousness. You will show them what it means to face a species that refuses to surrender. Hyun-woo smiled for the first time in years. 30 seconds to break the heavens, I can work with that. Pilot Kang Hyun-woo strapped himself into his fighter as Dr. Yoon Subin made final adjustments to the neural interface device. The metal helmet looked simple, but inside it contained technology that would turn his mind into a weapon. Remember, you need to get within 500 meters of the target ship, Subin explained as she connected the last wire. The closer you are, the stronger the neural cascade will be. Hyunwoo nodded. Through his cockpit window, he could see the massive hegemony dreadnought hanging in space like a black mountain. It was 10 times larger than any human ship ever built. Under normal circumstances, his small fighter would be destroyed before getting anywhere near it. All systems ready, reported his ground crew chief. Neural interface is online and stable. In the command center, Captain Lee Jinwoo watched the preparation with mixed emotions. They were about to discover if human sacrifice could become human victory. Launch when ready, pilot. Show them what we're made of. Hyunwoo's fighter accelerated away from the colony, its engines burning bright against the darkness. Behind him, 11 other volunteers followed in their own ships, each carrying the same deadly neural interface. The hegemony responded immediately. Energy beams lanced out from the dreadnought, destroying 2 human fighters in brilliant explosions. Warning, signals filled Hyunwoo's cockpit as enemy fire bracketed his ship. This is it, he whispered to himself, pressing the activation switch for the neural interface. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. Hyunwoo's consciousness expanded beyond his physical body, reaching out across space like invisible fire. He could feel the alien ship's quantum systems cold and mathematical, processing millions of calculations each second. Then his mind struck them. The hegemony dreadnought's lights flickered as its quantum processors began to fail. Navigation systems crashed. Weapon controls went offline. Life support started shutting down across multiple decks. In his fighter, Hyunwoo screamed as his neural pathways burned out, but he kept his hand pressed on the neural interface controls. 30 seconds of agony that felt like 30 years. Then darkness took him. The dreadnought listed to one side, its engines sputtering and dying. On the bridge, alien commanders stared at their displays in shock and fear. They had never seen anything like this. Down on New Seoul, the command center erupted in cheers. Captain Jinwoo watched the massive enemy ship drift powerless through space. It worked. By all the stars, it actually worked. Dr. Park Minji monitored Hyunwoo's vital signs from the medical bay. His brain activity had ceased completely, but his sacrifice had crippled a ship that carried 50,000 enemy soldiers. The other volunteer pilots pressed their attacks. Park Seung-ho flew his fighter into the launch bay of a hegemony cruiser before activating his neural interface. The psychic feedback tore through the ship's computer core, causing explosions that split the vessel in half. One by one, the volunteer pilots died, but each death brought devastation to the enemy fleet. Within an hour, 12 hegemony ships had been disabled or destroyed. The remaining enemy vessels began to retreat, their commanders trying to understand what had happened. But Dr. Yoon Subin discovered something else in her laboratory data. The neural interfaces were not just destroying individual ships. The psychic energy was creating resonance patterns that linked the attacks together. Each pilot's sacrifice made the next one more powerful. The effect is compounding, she explained, to Admiral Choi Do-hyun. Every human death creates a neural echo that strengthens subsequent attacks. It's as if we're building a psychic weapon that grows more deadly with each use. Commander Shin Ji-young studied the tactical displays. The hegemony is regrouping at the edge of the system. They're bringing in reinforcements. 3 more battle fleets just arrived. Admiral Do-hyun felt a cold certainty settle in his chest. The enemy would not make the same mistake twice. They would adapt their tactics and try to prevent the human fighters from getting close enough to use the neural weapons. In the underground bunkers, Song Nari tended to the families of the dead pilots. Children asked when their fathers were coming home. Parents wept for sons who had volunteered to die. The price of their small victory was written in tears and empty chairs. They died as heroes, Nari told the grieving families. They showed the galaxy that humanity will not surrender quietly. Engineer Kim Taeyang worked with renewed purpose in the repair bays. His own family was gone, but now he had seen proof that their deaths could be avenged. "How many more neural interfaces can we build?" he asked Dr. Subin. "With the materials we have, maybe 50, she replied. but we need volunteers to use them. The call went out across the colony. Men and women stepped forward to join the suicide squadrons. Former teachers, farmers, shopkeepers, and clerks trained on fighter controls they had never expected to use. They learned to fly not for escape, but for revenge. Dr. Park Minji found herself treating fewer wounded civilians and more volunteers preparing for neural interface surgery. The devices had to be surgically implanted to work properly, connecting directly to the brainstem. "Are you sure about this?" she asked each volunteer before the procedure. The answer was always the same: yes. They had lost everything to the hegemony. Death in battle was better than slow extinction. Within 2 days, the Human Defense Force had grown from 12 ships to nearly 200. Civilian transports were converted into weapons platforms. Mining ships carried neural interfaces instead of drilling equipment. Even damaged vessels that could barely fly were pressed into service. The hegemony fleet moved closer, more cautious now but still overwhelming in size. 500 warships against 200 hastily converted civilian craft. Under any normal calculation, the humans would be destroyed in minutes. But these were not normal circumstances. Captain Li Jinwu addressed his expanded fleet over the communication channels. "We are the last of our kind. Every world we called home is ash and memory. Our families are dead. Our future is gone. But we have one thing left to give them." He paused, looking out at the approaching enemy armada. "We give them our fury. We show them that some species burn too bright to be easily extinguished. When we die today, we die as humans, free and defiant to the end." The human fleet accelerated toward the enemy formation. In each ship, a volunteer sat ready to activate their neural interface, ready to burn out their mind in exchange for enemy destruction, ready to turn death itself into humanity's final weapon. Behind them, on the surface of New Seoul, the remaining civilians watched from shelter windows as their defenders flew toward certain death. Children placed their small hands against the glass, saying goodbye to a sky they would never see again. The battle for humanity's survival was about to begin, and with it, a demonstration of fury that would shake the foundations of the galaxy itself. The hegemony armada stretched across space like a dark ocean of metal and death. 500 warships in perfect formation, their weapons charged and ready to finish what they had started on Earth 5 years ago. At their head flew the massive command ship Eternal Dominion, home to the hegemony's supreme war leader. Admiral Choi Do-hyun sat in his command chair aboard the aging cruiser Defiant Dawn, watching the enemy fleet approach. His hair had gone completely white in the past week, but his eyes burned with the same fire that had kept humanity fighting when all hope seemed lost. "All ships, this is Admiral Do-hyun," he broadcast to his ragtag fleet. "Today we write the final chapter of the human story. Let us make it a chapter the galaxy will never forget." 200 human vessels began their attack run. Most were civilian ships never meant for battle. Mining barges carried neural interfaces instead of ore processors. Passenger liners had been gutted and filled with volunteers ready to die. Even small personal shuttles joined the formation, their single pilots grimly determined. The space between the fleets erupted in light as the hegemony opened fire. Energy beams that could melt asteroids reached out toward the human ships. The first wave of defenders died in seconds, their vessels vaporized by weapons beyond their technology to resist. But the survivors kept coming. Commander Shin Ji-young led the first neural strike squadron through the enemy fire. Her ship shook as alien beams punched holes through the hull, but she held her course toward the nearest hegemony dreadnought. "Neural interface activating in 10 seconds, she announced to her squadron. "It has been an honor to serve with all of you." Down on New Seoul, Engineer Kim Taeyang and Medic Song Nari worked frantically to keep the neural amplification arrays online. The massive ground-based transmitters boosted the power of each neural interface, allowing the psychic weapon to reach farther into space. "Array 3 is overloading," reported Taeyang's assistant. "The power surge from the neural strikes is too much for our equipment. Reroute through the backup systems," Taeyang ordered, his hands flying over the controls. "We keep these arrays running no matter what. Every second of extra power might save one more ship." In space, Commander Ji-young reached optimal range, and activated her neural interface. Her mind exploded outward like a star going supernova, washing over the hegemony dreadnought's quantum systems. The alien ship's shields flickered and died. Its weapon batteries went silent. Life support failed on 20 decks, but the neural cascade didn't stop there. Dr. Yoon Subin watched from her laboratory as her instruments detected something unprecedented. The psychic energy from Ji-Young's sacrifice was jumping from ship to ship, spreading through the enemy fleet like wildfire through dry grass. "The resonance effect is beyond our calculations," she reported to the command center. "Each neural strike is feeding power to the others. The hegemony's quantum communication network is carrying the psychic interference throughout their entire fleet." On the surface, Song Nari felt the ground shake as enemy bombardment began falling on the colony. The hegemony had decided to destroy everything, even if it cost them ships. Massive explosions walked across the landscape, turning buildings to rubble and forest to ash. "The eastern shelter took a direct hit," reported one of her medical teams. 40 families lost the children." Nari closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with renewed determination. "Set up triage stations in the western tunnels. We save who we can save." Above the burning colony, the space battle reached its crescendo. Human ships dove into the heart of the hegemony formation, their pilots singing old songs and reciting prayers as they prepared to die. Some made it close enough to use their neural weapons. Others were destroyed before they could strike back. But each death added to the growing psychic storm. Pilot Lee Min-soo flew his converted cargo hauler between 2 enemy cruisers, dodging fire that lit up his cockpit like lightning. His neural interface was already active, burning through his mind like acid through metal. But he held on long enough to reach the hegemony command ship. "This is for Earth," he whispered, pressing his hand against the interface controls one final time. The psychic blast that erupted from his dying mind hit the Eternal Dominion like a hammer blow. Bridge officers collapsed as their quantum computers exploded. Navigation systems throughout the massive ship began contradicting each other, sending the vessel into a slow, tumbling spiral. Dr. Park Min-ji monitored the neural interface signatures from the medical bay, watching as each human pilot burned out their brain in exchange for enemy destruction. The medical readings were horrific. Complete neural collapse, instant death, but the tactical reports showed their sacrifice was working. 73 enemy ships disabled or destroyed, she reported to Captain Jinwoo. "Our losses are at 140 vessels." Jinwoo nodded grimly. They were trading lives at a rate of nearly 2 to 1, but they were still outnumbered. And the hegemony was adapting, spreading their ships farther apart to limit the neural cascade effect. In the underground command center, Admiral Do-hyun made a decision that would haunt him forever. "All remaining ships, concentrate your attacks on the enemy command vessel. If we can take out their leadership, the fleet might retreat." The final 50 human ships changed course, diving toward the massive Eternal Dominion. The hegemony's escorts tried to intercept them, but too many had been damaged by neural strikes. The human vessels broke through the defensive line like arrows through paper. Engineer Kim Tae-yang felt the colony's power grid beginning to fail under the strain of the neural amplifiers and enemy bombardment. "We're losing primary power. The arrays won't last much longer." "Then we use everything we have left," Song Nari replied, her voice carrying over the communication system. "Channel all remaining power to the neural arrays. Give our pilots every advantage we can." The ground-based transmitters blazed with energy, sending waves of amplification up to the dying human fleet. On his instruments, Tae-yang watched the power levels climb beyond safe limits. The equipment would burn out within minutes, but those minutes might be enough. In space, the last human pilots activated their neural interfaces simultaneously. 50 minds burned out in perfect synchronization, creating a psychic blast that washed over the hegemony command ship like a tsunami of pure thought and fury. The Eternal Dominion's quantum core suffered a cascade failure that rippled through every system on the massive vessel. Bulkheads buckled as gravity generators failed. Atmosphere vented from thousands of breaches. The ship that had led the conquest of 100 worlds began to tear itself apart. But the cost was terrible. The human fleet was gone. Every pilot, every volunteer, every desperate soul who had flown into battle was dead. The space around New Sol was filled with the debris of human dreams and hegemony nightmares. On the planet's surface, the survivors watched through their shelter windows as burning wreckage fell from the sky like metal rain. The hegemony fleet was retreating, many ships damaged beyond repair, but New Sol was still doomed. Ground assault forces were all ready. Landing on the far continent, Dr. Yoon Subin stared at her instruments, which showed readings that defied belief. The neural resonance was still growing, still spreading through space along the quantum communication networks that connected every hegemony facility in the galaxy. "It's not over," she whispered. Then louder, "It's not over. The neural cascade is propagating beyond this system. It's following their quantum networks to every hegemony base and ship across the galaxy." Admiral Do-hyun felt a terrible hope stirring in his chest. How far will it spread? Subin's hands shook as she checked her calculations again. Everywhere, every hegemony facility connected to their quantum network. The psychic resonance is using their own communication system against them. The old admiral closed his eyes and thought of Earth, Mars, and all the other human worlds that had died screaming, under hegemony guns. Then perhaps our people didn't die in vain after all. The neural cascade was spreading faster than light itself, carried by the hegemony's own quantum communication network to every corner of their vast empire. On distant worlds, alien commanders watched their computer systems flicker and die as human fury burned through their circuits like digital fire. But on New Sol, the end was still coming. Captain Lee Jin-woo stood in the command center, watching enemy ground forces advance across the colony's outer districts. The hegemony troops moved with mechanical precision, their powered armor gleaming in the light of burning buildings. "They'll reach the main population centers in 6 hours," reported his tactical officer. "Our ground defenses won't slow them down for long." Jinwoo nodded, his face grim. The space battle had cost the enemy heavily, but they still had enough troops to finish the job. 3 million civilians huddled in underground shelters, waiting for death to find them in the dark. Dr. Yoon Subin burst into the command center, her clothes torn and her face streaked with soot from a bombing attack on her laboratory. "Captain, I need to speak with you privately. What I've discovered, it changes everything." They moved to a side office where broken windows let in the smoke and ash from the burning colony. Subin activated a portable computer and showed him readings that made his blood run cold. "The neural interfaces don't just create localized effects," she explained. "Every human death amplifies the psychic resonance exponentially. If we could coordinate the deaths of everyone remaining on this planet." Jinwoo stared at the data, understanding but not wanting to believe. "You're talking about turning the entire colony into a weapon, every man, woman, and child." "The quantum mathematics are clear," Subin continued. 3 million minds dying simultaneously would create a neural cascade, powerful enough to burn out every hegemony system within 1,000 light years, maybe farther. The captain sank into a chair, the weight of the proposal crushing down on him. "You want us to commit genocide against ourselves, to murder our own children." "I want us to choose how we die," Subin replied quietly. "The hegemony will kill every human on this planet anyway, but if we die on our terms, at our chosen moment, we can take their entire empire with us." Admiral Choi Do-hyun arrived within minutes, along with Dr. Park Min-ji, engineer Kim Tae-young, and medic Song Nari. The colony's remaining leaders gathered around Subin's computer, studying the terrible equations that spelled out humanity's final choice. "How would we do it?" asked Min-ji, her medical training making her think of practical details even in the face of such horror. "Modified neural interfaces connected to the colony's communication network," Subin answered. "Everyone would need to activate them at exactly the same moment. The synchronized brain death would create a psychic explosion that—" She paused, checking her calculations one more time. "That would propagate through every quantum network in this part of the galaxy, not just hegemony systems. Everything connected to subspace communication would be affected." Tae-yang leaned forward. "You mean other species too? Innocent civilizations?" Some systems might be damaged, Subin admitted, but the hegemony would be completely destroyed. Every ship, every base, every world in their empire would lose all technology simultaneously. Billions of their soldiers would die when life support fails. Songnari thought of the families hiding in the shelters below. And our children? We would ask them to die for this? The room fell silent. Through the broken windows they could hear the distant sound of energy. Weapons as human defenders fell back toward the colony center. Time was running out. Admiral Do-hyun spoke first. I've spent 12 years fighting these monsters. I've watched them burn worlds and murder billions of innocent people. If there's a chance to stop them forever, the decision can't be ours alone, Captain Jinwoo interrupted. We need to ask the people. Let them choose. Within an hour, emergency communication systems carried the proposal to every shelter and bunker in the colony. Families gathered around small screens to hear their leaders explain the impossible choice they faced. We can die as victims, Jinwoo's voice echoed through the underground chambers. Or we can die as the weapon that breaks our oppressors forever. Every adult must vote. Every parent must decide for their children. The voting took 2 hours. 2 hours while hegemony ground forces advanced through the outer city, destroying everything in their path. 2 hours while human defenders died buying time for democracy to function one last time. Songnari moved through the shelters, helping families understand what they were choosing. In Shelter 17, she found an elderly woman named Kim Booney, holding her granddaughter, a girl no more than 8 years old. If we say yes, Booney asked, will it hurt? The neural interface causes instant brain death, Nari answered honestly. There should be no pain. The old woman looked down at the sleeping child in her arms. And if we say no? The hegemony will find us eventually. They don't take prisoners. Booney nodded slowly. Then we vote yes. Better to die with purpose than to die for nothing. The pattern repeated in every shelter. Parents holding their children, grandparents remembering lost worlds, young couples facing an unthinkable decision. Some wept. Some prayed. Some sat in silent acceptance. When the voting ended, the result was overwhelming. 97% chose death with purpose over meaningless extinction. Dr. Yoon Subin worked with desperate speed to modify the colony's communication network. Every screen, every speaker, every electronic device would need to carry the neural interface signal simultaneously. The technical challenge was immense, but engineer Taeyang's teams made it possible. We have maybe 30 minutes before the hegemony reaches the main shelters, he reported. After that, they'll jam our communications and we won't be able to coordinate the activation. In the medical bay, Dr. Park Minji prepared stimulants that would keep the neural interface subjects conscious until the moment of activation. Volunteers throughout the colony received small injections that would prevent them from falling unconscious during the process. Are you ready? Admiral Do-hyun asked Dr. Subin as the final preparations were completed. She looked around at her, friends and colleagues, people who had become her family during humanity's darkest hour. The neural interfaces are synchronized. Every person in the colony will die within the same second. The cascade effect should be... She paused, then smiled sadly. Spectacular. Captain Jinwoo opened a communication channel to every shelter in the colony. Citizens of New Seoul, this is your final message from the command center. In 60 seconds, we will activate the neural interfaces. You will feel a moment of expanding consciousness, then nothing. But in that moment, you will be part of something greater than any single human life. Songnari held the hand of a frightened child in Shelter 23. Don't be afraid, she whispered. We're going to become stars. Throughout the colony, 3 million people prepared to die. They held each other. They spoke words of love. They thought of homeworlds they would never see again and children who would never grow up. 10 seconds, announced Dr. Subin from the command center. Above ground, hegemony soldiers broke through the last defensive lines and began advancing toward the shelter entrances. Their sensors detected massive energy readings from the colony's communication network. 5 seconds. In the deepest shelters, human families closed their eyes and dreamed of Earth's blue skies and Mars' red sunsets. Activation. 3 million minds exploded outward simultaneously, creating a psychic storm that tore through space and time itself. The neural cascade raced along quantum pathways at impossible speeds, carrying the accumulated fury of an extinct species to every corner of the galaxy. On New Sol, the hegemony soldiers collapsed as their equipment failed and their own implanted. Technology burned out their brains. The planet fell silent except for the wind moving through empty buildings. But across the galaxy, the real destruction was just beginning. The neural cascade erupted from New Sol like the death cry of an entire species, racing through quantum communication networks at speeds that defied physics. Across the galaxy, the psychic storm of 3 million dying minds struck every connected system with the force of humanity's final fury. On the hegemony capital world of Dominion Prime, the Supreme Commander was reviewing battle reports when every screen in his command center went white. Then the screaming began. Quantum processors throughout the massive complex began destroying themselves, their crystalline cores cracking under the weight of human consciousness. Life support systems failed in cascading waves. Gravity generators sparked and died. The orbital defense platforms around the planet went dark one by one, but it was more than just technology failing. The hegemony soldiers themselves, enhanced with quantum implants, began collapsing as the neural cascade burned. Through their augmented minds, officers who had conquered 100 worlds clutched their heads and babbled about burning skies and vengeful ghosts. The effects spread outward from planet to planet, following the quantum communication grid that linked the hegemony empire together. On military bases scattered across 1,000 star systems, the same scene played out. Warships lost power and drifted helplessly in space. Soldiers went insane. Computer systems that had functioned perfectly for centuries began destroying themselves. The fortress world of Nexus 7, General Vorthak watched his army of 5 million troops descend into chaos within minutes. The quantum enhancement implants that made them superior soldiers became conduits for the human neural cascade. Veterans of hundreds of battles dropped their weapons and stared at the sky, weeping for reasons they couldn't understand. "What is happening to them?" demanded his aide, one of the few officers without quantum implants. Vorthak didn't answer. He was too busy trying to understand the reports flooding in from across the Empire. Every world, every ship, every facility connected to the quantum network was experiencing the same catastrophic failures. Deep in space, the massive hegemony shipyards that produced their war fleets began tearing themselves apart. Construction. Robots went berserk, turning their tools on the very ships they were building. Automated defense systems fired on their own facilities. Within hours, industrial complexes that had taken decades to build were reduced to floating wreckage. On the prison world of torment, where the hegemony kept the survivors of conquered species, the sudden failure of the quantum security systems opened every cell simultaneously. Millions of prisoners found themselves free for the first time in years, while their hegemony guards rolled on the ground screaming about voices in their heads. The cascade reached even the most distant outposts. On the edge of hegemony space, exploration fleets lost navigation and life support simultaneously. Scout ships that had been mapping new territories to conquer found themselves adrift in the void, their crews driven mad by neural feedback they couldn't comprehend. But the destruction wasn't limited to the hegemony. Other species throughout the galaxy felt the effects as the neural cascade propagated through every quantum network it encountered. The peaceful Xentheran collective lost communication with half their worlds when their relay stations burned out. The merchant princes of the Trade Federation watched their financial networks collapse as human fury overwrote their market algorithms. On the neutral world of Haven Station, Ambassador Kelthera of the Galactic Council received emergency reports from across known space. "Every quantum-linked system in the galaxy is either damaged or destroyed," she reported to the emergency session. "We're receiving distress signals from 200 different species." The ancient curator, whose people had maintained the galaxy's historical records for 1,000,000 years, spoke with quiet awe. "In all our archives, we have never recorded anything like this. a single species using their own extinction as a weapon against their oppressors. As the hours passed, the true scope of the catastrophe became clear. The hegemony empire was collapsing, not from military defeat, but from the madness of their own soldiers and the failure of their technology. Entire fleets drifted powerless through space. Planetary governments ceased to function as their quantum-enhanced administrators lost their sanity. On the former human colony of Terra Nova, now a hegemony agricultural world, the alien overseers suddenly found themselves cut off from central command. The human slaves they had worked to death for 5 years were all gone, but their rebellion echoed through the neural cascade that drove the remaining hegemony forces insane. Some worlds tried to restore order, but the damage was too extensive. Every attempt to rebuild quantum communication systems failed, as residual neural energy continued to interfere with the networks. The empire that had conquered half the galaxy in 2 centuries was reduced to isolated worlds with no contact between them. In the ruins of the hegemony capital, the few surviving officials tried to understand what had happened. Records showed that the neural cascade had originated from the human colony they had been attacking, but the readings made no sense. How could an extinct species create a psychic weapon powerful enough to destroy an interstellar empire? Years passed. The galaxy slowly recovered from the cascade's effects, but the hegemony never did. Their scattered worlds either collapsed into barbarism or were liberated by the species they had once oppressed. The quantum communication networks were eventually rebuilt, but they included safeguards against the kind of neural interference that had brought down the greatest empire in galactic history. New civilizations rose from the ashes. The species that had hidden in fear of hegemony conquest emerged to reclaim their freedom. Trade routes that had been controlled by the empire became open to all. The galaxy entered a new age of cooperation and exploration. But humanity was remembered. On the memorial world of remembrance, established where New Sol had once stood, representatives from 100 species came to pay tribute to the extinct race that had sacrificed everything to break the chains of tyranny. The monument was simple, a black stone pyramid with words carved in every known language. Here stood humanity. They faced extinction with defiance, turned death into victory, and in their final hour, broke the heavens themselves. Let all who read this know, some spirits burned too bright to be extinguished by mere death. The memorial became a pilgrimage site for species throughout the galaxy. Parents brought their children to learn about the race that chose to die as weapons rather than live as victims. Military academies taught courses about the Battle of New Sol and the tactical principles of ultimate sacrifice. But it was the stories that spread farthest. In spaceport bars and merchant guild halls, travelers spoke of the day the humans chose extinction over surrender. They told of Admiral Choi Do-hyun, who led the last fleet knowing it meant certain death. Of Dr. Yoon Subin, who turned consciousness itself into a weapon. Of the 3 million colonists who voted to die so that freedom might live. The tales grew with each telling, but the core truth remained. Humanity had shown the galaxy that some things were worth dying for, and some enemies were worth dying to defeat. And when new tyrants rose to threaten the free peoples of the galaxy, they found themselves facing opponents who whispered human names before battle and remembered the lesson of New Sol, that the greatest victory sometimes comes not from living well but from choosing how to die. In the end, humanity's extinction became their immortality, their death became their greatest victory, and their final hour of fury echoed through eternity as a promise to all who would oppress the innocent. Some species burn too bright to be easily forgotten, and some wrath is powerful enough to break the heavens themselves.